so many devotees live.
Yeah.
Mm. I think I'm coming down for that.
Oh, you are? Oh, wow.
With Kalakanta and Adikarta and a handful of devotees from here.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Seems to be what the plan is at any rate.
Actually, today I'm in Alachua. Probably in the evening we'll.
Well, you know, there's such a close relationship between the Orlando and Alachua temples anyway.
Yes, yes, yes.
You know, practically the same temple, at least sister temples, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And my best friend is your GBC, being Sesha Prabhu.
Sesha Prabhu.
Yeah.
All right, Prabhu, 11:30. I just went live. Before you get started, want to thank you for wonderful time you're able to give it to Orlando congregation for us to make progress in spiritual life. For the audience on Facebook and Zoom, to give introduction about Chitratma Das Prabhu, who doesn't need, everybody knows him, but still, we want to mention something. So he joined ISKCON in St. Louis, Missouri in 1973 and received a Brahmanical initiation by Srila Prabhupada next year, 1974. And he was a big part of the deity installation in St. Louis, Sri Sri Nitai Gaur Nataraj. And he started getting trained in the deity program and fully engaged and became a full-time management from the Pujari perspective for the temple. And he had to move in 1976 away from St. Louis and became Pujari in Dallas, Houston, Chicago, on the also the Radha Damodar buses. And he has served as an assistant in deity program all the three New York temples, like 55th Street, 7th Avenue, and Brooklyn. And currently, he is managing the deity management board for the Radha Shamasundar in Alachua, Florida. You all have seen how beautiful Radha Shamasundar is, and wonderful deity services. We could really feel the vibe there. And he is also very widely known as known for his background on the way he performs yagnas. In fact, I think I had a couple of opportunities to witness some of the initiation programs that he has done in different places. And he's very elaborate, and we want to thank for him for all the services he does. From the all the yagnas, samskaras, and deity services. And in the early 1980s, Chitratma Prabhu began to follow his interest on studying the lives of different acharyas, basically researching many avenues of backgrounds, and he has developed a very comprehensive picture of the lives of many acharyas who are in the era of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he currently, as I mentioned, he currently lives in Alachua. He also travels part of his year, portion of his year, and accompany Indradumna Maharaj and Badahari Das Prabhu to all over the world. Literally, I've seen some of the videos. They go, "Can we really go? It's so cold," and they go to name the country. They go, like Poland, Russia, Ukraine, India, many other places. And he is blessed with three children, and also 3 grandchildren, and his wonderful wife, Pashupati Mataji. So whatever introduction I can give, it's very, it's not enough for what he has done over the years. He's probably 1973 is initial year he joined. I wasn't even born at that time. So Prabhu, thank you so much for your time. Please take us from here and engage us in a wonderful topic that you have picked, how to lead the rest of our life.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. Whenever anyone says, "Oh, this person needs no introduction," nonetheless, they always go on and introduce. One correction, I have 4 grandchildren now. Maybe a 5th on the way. That's some plan. We'll see. It's actually one of the points that you mentioned in that brief introduction there is about my traveling with Indradumna Swami and Bhattahari Prabhu, and this was a big part of my spiritual life up until about a year ago, as the world changed for many of us. And at the beginning of that, many of us thought, oh, this is going to be a great setback. How are we going to move forward? No one can travel and preach, no sannyasis coming through, no, kirtan melas, et cetera, et cetera. But, we've seen that when Lord Chaitanya, when Maya closes one door, Lord Chaitanya says, oh, really? You think? And he opens another. And thus we have these Zoom conferences. Prior to this pandemic time, this format was hardly used by anybody. If someone had been very smart, they would have invested in Zoom way ahead of time and made hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the point being that this was not seen as a used medium. But now everyone in every scenario is flooding the different formats, StreamYard, Zoom, Mini, so many different names for these formats, because the preaching of Lord Chaitanya cannot be stopped. We are on the cusp of the beginning of a 10,000 golden year period. And we're seeing how Prabhupada spread Lord Chaitanya's movement so vastly throughout the world, taking the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta up and embracing it, moving forward like that. And that's just the beginning. So some pandemic, some government ruling, some restrictions, any of these things, they cannot stop Lord Chaitanya's movement. And this meeting we're having right here today is the factual proof of that. So I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this forward-thinking process of spreading Krishna consciousness. So first, my pranams. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lam Jayate Girim Yakripatamaham Pande Sri Gurum Dinatarino Avancha Kalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bahebacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This second prayer that I quoted there, Mukam Karoti Vachalam, this is Kaviraj Goswami is speaking. I'm lame, I'm dumb meaning not very well educated, I can't speak so well, but by the mercy of the spiritual master, I can be successful. We see that Lochan Das Thakur has one very nice prayer in the same manner at the beginning of his Chaitanya Mangala, where he's praying that I'm quite incompetent. I really don't have much skill, much ability. But by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, by the blessings of Guru, then I can become successful. So this really is the mood of a devotee. Not only our mood, it's our reality. As you mentioned, you weren't born when I joined the movement, but when I joined the movement, what qualification did I have? None. My qualifications at that time were very, very minimal in the scope of Vaishnava life. But this was Srila Prabhupada's greatness, that he took those of us that had no qualification and gave us the opportunity to present ourselves as Vaishnavas, to engage in those activities that would raise us to a platform of devotional service. He often would describe the background we came from, and we can only imagine how he must have shuddered to think of that, I had a great opportunity one time. The previous Acharya at the Radharaman temple, Vishwambar Goswami, Padmanabh Goswami's father. Many of us know Padmanabh Goswami. Well, I've known Padmanabh Goswami since he was a young boy. And his father, Vishwambar Goswami, was very kind to me, as he was to many devotees. But he was touring America once and stayed in New York. And my wife and I got the opportunity to host him. And he spent 2 or 3 days with us there. And I took him around to all of the places of Prabhupada's pastimes. up on the Upper West Side, 94 Bowery, 26 Second Avenue, Tompkins Square Park, all of these places. And he was very enlightened. He was a Vrindavan friend of Prabhupada's. He and Prabhupada knew each other of the same age, were living in Vrindavan at the same time when Prabhupada was studying and preparing to come to America. And regularly they would meet each other in the streets or things of this nature. So after taking Vishwambar Goswami around to these places, we were driving back to the temple, and he said to me, he said, many people, they appreciate what Srila Prabhupada has done. Many people in India, they appreciate what Srila Prabhupada has done. But until they come and see where he has done it, they have no idea of his greatness. So this was the caliber of Srila Prabhupada, to go into such a scenario that was unheard of, unthinkable by most sadhus, and nonetheless come out shining like a gemstone, bringing so many people to the path of Krishna consciousness. So we're all very grateful and indebted to Prabhupada for this service, and there's no way in our life we can ever fulfill that indebtedness, but that obligation. But by the opportunity of spreading Krishna consciousness, this makes an effort at that. Prabhupada was famous for having said, I have made your good fortune, now you make others. So as his disciples, as his followers, we have an obligation to share Krishna consciousness, either amongst our own group or amongst those outside by the mission of street sankirtan and book distribution and so on. Festival parties like what Indradinma Swami does, these are opportunities to give Krishna consciousness in a very wonderful manner that directly connects those persons that come in contact with the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is my debt of gratitude to Prabhupada to engage in this type of service. So for today, I was discussing what verse, what subject matter, and I thought, this is the daylight savings time switch, the one day of the year that everybody is officially allowed to be late for whatever. Late for work, late for church, late for getting up, whatever it is. Oh yeah, it was daylight savings time. Okay, you're forgiven this one day. Don't let it happen again. Because the time factor is so present. And the manipulation of the time factor throws us completely off balance. This is artificial adjustment, this daylight savings time. We won't go into all those kind of details, but it's an artificial adjustment, and therefore it changes our time flow. So I thought, what better verse to think of than that famous verse from Bhagavad Gita. So chapter 11, verse 32. Bhagavan Uvacha, Kaloshmi Loka Shayakrit Pravidao Lokan Samahartum Iha Pravita Rite Pi Tvamna Bhavishyanti Sarve Yevashtita Pritya Keshu Yudaha. Bhagavan Uvacha, the personality of Godhead said, Kala, time, Asmi, I am, Loka, of the worlds, Kshvaya Krit, the destroyer, Pravida, great, Lokan, all people, Samartum, in destroying, Iha, in this world, Pravita, engaged, Rite, without except for, Api, even, Tvam, you, Na, never, Bhavishyanti, will be, Sarve, all, Ye, who, Avashtita, situated, Prati Anukeshu, on the opposite sides, Yoda, the soldiers. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, time I am, the great destroyer of the worlds, and I have come here to destroy all people. With the exception of you, the Pandavas, all the soldiers here on both sides will be slain. Prabhupada's purport. Although Arjuna knew that Krishna was his friend and the Supreme personality of Godhead, he was puzzled by the various forms exhibited by Krishna. Therefore, he asked further about the actual mission of this devastating force. It is written in the Vedas that the supreme truth destroys everything, even the Brahmanas. As stated in the Katha Upanishad, eventually all the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and everyone else are devoured like a meal by the Supreme. This form of the Supreme Lord is the all-devouring giant. And here, Krishna presents himself in that form of all-devouring time. Except for a few Pandavas, everyone who was present on that battlefield would be devoured by him. Arjuna was not in favor of the fight, and he thought it was better not to fight. Then there would be no frustration. In reply, the Lord is saying that even if he did not fight, every one of them would be destroyed, for that was his plan. If Arjuna stopped fighting, they would die in another way. Death could not be checked, even if he did not fight. In fact, they were already dead. Time is destruction, and all manifestations are to be vanquished by the desire of the Supreme Lord. That is the law of nature. So this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, some very, very strong points in here. Of course, we know the history of Bhagavad Gita. By this point, Arjuna has already declined to fight. Krishna has already presented evidence to him. And now, in a final show of supremacy, if you will, Krishna reveals the universal form. And that universal form is actually quite frightening to Arjuna. I mean, I don't know how many of us could tolerate or sustain our disposition, our composition, if we were to see this massive form. And so after seeing this form, Arjuna requests an additional explanation. Okay, you've got this ghastly form. What is your purpose? What is the reason for it? And in this way, this is when Krishna gives him the explanation. Now, this is a further point, as Prabhupada points in the purport to Arjuna, that even though you're not inclined to fight, okay, suppose you don't fight. I'm encouraging you to. It is your duty to. But let's say you don't. Still, the goal will be met. My plan will not be vanquished. My plan is that all of these misaligned, all of these miscreant Kshatriyas will be destroyed. You can either take part in it or not. That's your choice. Living entity has their free will. But you should know that if you don't take part, it's still going to come about. So this is the clear line of distinction that Krishna is giving here. Your plan, that may or may not come about. My plan will definitely come about. So there's a famous saying, time and tide wait for no man. And if we look around the world, we see that this is true. There's so much waste, so much wasted opportunities, resources that are foolishly squandered, wealth that is spent uselessly and wastefully, words that are spoken without any thought, just a vast amount of waste, misuse of resources. But the most important, we could even say the most shameful of waste, is the waste of our time. I'm sure you've all seen that little cartoon or meme, as they call them nowadays on the internet. It shows a little boy and he's thinking play, play, play. And then he's a little older, he's thinking school, school, school. And then he's a little older and he's thinking sex, sex, sex. And then he's a little older and he's thinking work, work, work. And then a little older and money, money, money. And then a little older and death, death, death. So this is the way of our life, the materialist life, I should say, that they're preoccupied with what is the dominant influence at that particular time. Their life is manipulated, constricted, I should say, by these types of thought processes, by this influence. But the fact of the matter is, no matter how much we engage in pursuing whatever that particular time thought is, we can't get any of it back. That time is wasted. Not 1 second, Prabhupada used to say, not 1 second can be returned to us. There's that very famous story that Prabhupada tells of the man on his deathbed. Actually, this is a first-hand story. Prabhupada mentions in 2 or 3 different places. This was an associate of Prabhupada's. And the man was dying at the young age, if you will, of 54. I remember when I was a young student in the 60s and the revolution and the hippie days and all that, the slogan was, don't trust anybody over 30. And then in due course of time, I became 30 and I realized, wow, don't trust anybody under 30. So, and now, late into my 60s, I'm thinking, I still have quite a bit of time left. 60 is not so old. And yet my grandchildren are looking at me and thinking, God, he's so old. So this age factor is completely according to one's perception. At any rate, Prabhupada mentions this man was only 54 years old. Now at 54, most of us are still in the thick of things. And this man was. He had businesses and he had goals and he had family and sons and he wanted them to. So he was dying and had not completed what he wanted to accomplish. Here, if we refer back to this verse, to the purport, Krishna is saying, my plan is always successful. Arjuna, you don't take place, that's okay. My plan will be successful. Here, Prabhupada is giving this example. This man's plan was not successful because he was not the supreme controller. He had not planned at the age of 54 that he would die. Who plans to die at that time? None of us plan to die at any time. But nonetheless, this was happening. So the man was very, very wealthy. And he was requesting the doctor, I will pay you anything, just extend my life by 4 more years. I only need 4 more years to accomplish my goal. 4 more years. Now that seems to, such a long time, I can do that, but 4 years is fleeting. We've all had this experience of losing track of time. You know how it goes, the alarm clock goes off in the morning and you think, you look at the clock, okay, if I get up right now, everything, I'll have very perfect timing. And then you hit that snooze button, right? And then suddenly it's 1 hour later. Oh my God, what happened? And then everything's chaotic, right? We've all had that experience. The time, it just, only 5 minutes. I'll just take 5 minutes more sleep and then I'll get up and be refreshed. Even if you only take that 5 minutes, you're not going to be any more refreshed, but you never just take that 5 minutes. It turns out to be 1 entire hour. So this man is pleading with the doctor, just give me 4 more years. If I have 4 years, then all my goals will be accomplished. But we know factually, no, your goals will not be accomplished in 4 years. First of all, you're not getting that 4 years. Doesn't matter how wealthy you are. It doesn't matter how expert the doctor is. The time of death comes when it is allotted to you. The time of death comes when you have to give it up. As the saying, time and tide wait for no man. Your time comes and that's it. You have to go. It's not a negotiable point. Okay, Yamaraj, look, I'll tell you what, here's the deal. I've got this much gold and I need this many years, but you're not going to give me all of them. So why don't we come to an even arrangement? I'll give you this much and you give me 2 more years. How's that? I'll just take 2. My father, when I was growing up, as any parent does, when I would go out, he would set a curfew. He'd say, okay, I want you home at 11 o'clock. No, he'd say, I want you home at midnight. Oh, Dad, can't I come home at 1 o'clock? How about 11 o'clock, he would say. So not a negotiable point. You take what's there or you get nothing. So, and I used that on my kids several times. At any rate, the point being that this man was pleading for that extra time, but it was not going to come. It wasn't going to happen. He wasn't going to get that extension because the time of death is finite. You have a bank account, you have so much money in it. Once that bank account is expended, doesn't matter what's left, you're not getting any more extension. The money's gone. So You know, you can have $1,000, $1 million, it doesn't matter. Whatever is there, once you spend it, unless you have taken time to put something back into it, you've reached the end of it. Now, this material body has a finite time. It's got an expiration date. You know, you open the refrigerator, you pull that jug of milk out, and the expiration date was 3 days ago. You hesitate. I don't know. You give it a smell. Oh, no, this is not any good anymore. It's past its expiration. It's turned. There's nothing you can do to turn it back. Oh, if I just, you know, put this or that additive, it'll become good milk again. No, it's expired. In the same way, we have our expiration date. And once it comes, we have to accept the fact that it is definite. It's going to run dry. We've all had that experience with the bank account. You know, you go to use a credit card or something, but that's only because nothing's been put into it. Whereas in the spiritual life, everything we do is adding to that bank account. Back in the 70s, in the late 70s, in 55th Street, New York City, there was street kirtan, street harinam all the time. And there was a theater group there at the temple. They were called the Vaikuntha Players. And the Vaikuntha Players were amazing theatrical devotees, song, dance, theater, all of it. So they would do what was popular at the time, street theater. They'd be out with the Harinam party dressed in regular clothes. And then the kirtan would stop, and all of a sudden they'd do this impromptu theater. So one of the famous ones, some of you may have heard of this, called The Wrong Bank Account. And so the man would come up to the supposed teller and make a deposit, and they would do a scene 2 or 3 like this. And then each scene, the age would advance. And so the teller would be older and the man would be older. And then finally, this very elderly, decrepit individual would come up to make a withdrawal. And the teller would tell him, no, there's nothing in this account. How is that possible? I've been putting it in my whole life. And she would laugh and say, no, you've been putting money in the wrong bank account. So then there'd be some purport to the performance. Don't spend your life putting money in the wrong bank account like that. So it was a nice thing we used to do back in the 70s like that. Sometimes it would be done at the Sunday feast before the lecture or something, this play. Classic old school ISKCON. Great stuff back then. So we have to be very diligent with our finances. Whatever our income is, we have a budget. And that budget has to be spent carefully so that the money stretches. In the same way, we're limited in this life. We have to be very diligent with how we spend it. Prabhupada gives that example, 25 years of student life, 25 years of married life, 25 years of retired life, 25 years of preaching life. Of course, retired life means vanaprastha, preaching life means sannyas, but in these days, that title may differ a little bit how it's done. Not exactly everyone can just hit the road and be a sannyasi. Neither is it expected. That's always the smaller percentage of society. And then, of course, here in Florida, we have the retired community. You're in Orlando, a bit closer to the villages than I am. We can see what the modern Western elderly person's idea of retirement is just by looking at this community called the villages. So much embarrassing. That's the only word. Embarrassing activities take place there, you know? So the point is that we're limited in what we're going to achieve and the type of goals we have by what our age impact is. When you're a young child, your goals are limited by the fact that you're a young child, have no experience, have no freedom. When you're an adult, your goals are going to be limited and different like that. In the youth, it's expected. You're going to concentrate on your education. This is understood. This is the service, actually. I used to tell my children when they were in school, this is your service to Krishna, to do good, to get good grades, to make something of yourself like this so you can be a respected devotee. And then in our later years, in our family life, economic settlement, expansion, maintenance, these are the goals that we have to concentrate on and be successful in. One cannot be a successful householder without some income, without some savings, without some management of the expenses for the sake of the family. And then after this, of course, in our elder years, most of the concentration is on trying to stay healthy and active because the body's beginning to diminish. I'm a classic example of that. You know, I'm pushing 70 now. I've had 2 knees replaced. I can't run like I used to. Jumping off of a roof onto the ground, that's not an issue anymore. There's no chance that's happening. All of these are things that we're much more careful because it's a different focus. The body's beginning to diminish. So we have to look at all this time. What is the real essence? What is the essential point of my life? In the world of perfumery, in the world of scents, the better the quality of the essence of the oil, the better the fragrance and the more lasting the effect is. In Vrindavan, there's a perfume wala, if you will. His name is K.C. Panda. I've been shopping from him for my DD since the 1980s. And of course, now it's K.C. Panda and Sons, because he's gotten older like I have, and his sons have taken over the business. But at any rate, when you go to his shop and you tell him I want some sandalwood oil, he'll ask you, what rate do you want? What quality? I have best, I have very good, and I have the finest. And each one is different by 2 factors, not only the price, as we would expect, but the essence, the essential nature of it, the purity of it. So he openly will tell you, this one is not as pure as that one. And for the most pure, you'll pay more. So this is a very clear understanding. Standard, best, and better. This standard, better, and best. Excuse me. Standard, better, and best. Which quality of sandalwood? Well, you can imagine it's for the deities. I always get the best sandalwood oil. It's a little more expensive, but we know that the quality is going to be pure. So this is true in our spiritual life too. This is true in our practices of devotional service. What is the degree of purity that we want? What is the essential quality? 25% essence, 50% essence, 100% essence? We have to decide which of these percentages do we want present. Now, of course, we all want the best, you know, but not all of us are able to afford the best. My father used to have a saying, you know, a Saks Fifth Avenue taste with a TJ Maxx budget. Saks Fifth Avenue, those I'm sure all of you know, is a very, very high-end store. And TJ Maxx, well, that's there in the strip mall. You get, you know, a shirt for $2, but you get $2 quality. But this is the wonderful thing about Krishna consciousness as given to us by Srila Prabhupada. Krishna consciousness is coming in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We see that so many of Mahaprabhu's associates were householders. There's no restriction that to practice Krishna consciousness, to be successful in Krishna consciousness, one is required to be a renunciate. It's not necessary. We see from these associates of Mahaprabhu, mostly they were all householders. Yet they were not bereft of the presence of Krishna consciousness in their life. Quite the opposite. There was always a prominence of Krishna consciousness in the activities that they were there to facilitate for the pastimes of the Lord. Classic example, if we look at Shivananda Sen. Now, Shivananda Sen was a householder with sons, and matter of fact, he was quite a wealthy householder. He had 2 or 3 different homes, 2 homes in Bengal and 1 home there in Puri. And Shivananda Sen would arrange for all the devotees every year to go to Jagannath Puri to associate with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during the Rath Yatra festival time. Now, Rath Yatra festival included so many different activities. It included Dol Yatra, it included Gundisha Marjana, it included the Rath Yatra itself, it included even afterwards the different festivals that came, Janmashtami, so on like that. So he would arrange for these devotees going, and it would take 1 month for the devotees to travel from Bengal to Jagannath Puri. And during that time, he would arrange of the travel, places to stay, paying of tolls, providing of prasadam, everything like this, out of his own pocket. And then they would arrive in Jagannath Puri, and they would stay for 4 months, because they arrived there before Rath Yatra starts. What is it? It's the beginning of the Chaturmasya season, the rainy season. So there's no travel. So, all right, they would stay there for 4 months. And then when that was finished, okay, now going back. This is all told very detailed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, to the pastimes, the timeline like this. So this basically means 6 months of the year they weren't working, but they were householders. But they did such a good job of providing for themselves, their families, during the rest of the year, that they were able to do this, and as a result of that, be an active part in the pastimes of Mahaprabhu. Now, we may not have that kind of facility. We may not have that kind of time where we can take 6 months of the year off and just, huddy ball. Sometimes we do get that facility, depending. I'm very fortunate that the type of work that I do and the circumstances I'm in there, my seniority and all, I'm able to take off a couple of months of the year, spend 1 month in the spring traveling with Indradumna Swami and Bhattahari throughout Russia and Poland and Ukraine and places like this. We've gone to Japan and Australia and preach, share Krishna consciousness, speak about the pastimes of the Lord and his devotees. And then the rest of the time working very diligently to take care of the necessary circumstances, take care of this. So this is due to understanding how to manage our time. And this was something the devotees of Mahaprabhu were expert at. It's it's a bit like financial matters, investing, for instance. How much will I get back on an investment? We all hear these advertisements, especially when you get to a certain age. Your email box is filled with offers of different investments, and are you set for your retirement? And what have you done to build up your portfolio? All these things, because everybody out there in the internet world knows everything about everyone. There's no secrets. If I go to look at a tent, I was looking at a tent for the backyard to block the sun over a slab I have where I do jugas online. So immediately once I started searching that, all kinds of camping things started coming into my feed. It's because of all the algorithms and the way the internet works, and everything is known to everybody. So when you hit a certain age, all these things come up. Are you ready for your retirement? Have you invested properly? So spiritually speaking, we should look at, how am I investing my time? What will I get back on the return of the time I'm using right now? Will it bring me another birth and death in this material world? Or will it bring me eternal life in the spiritual world with Sri Krishna? This is the gift that Srila Prabhupada gave to us. Just follow this process and you'll go back to home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada said this so many times. Just follow this process, you go back to home, back to Godhead. This was a big point that Prabhupada always made. So we should understand how important that is, that investment of our time. What am I doing with my day? If I don't have Krishna at the center of my day, if I don't have Krishna conscious activities as the foundation of my day, simply wasted time. Simply wasted time. This is what creates a Krishna conscious atmosphere. Raising children, for instance. We have to raise our children in an environment that fosters and encourages their Krishna conscious activities. They're taking up the practices of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada would often say, it's so simple, the child is always imitating the parents. So if the parents have Krishna conscious activities, the children will have those Krishna conscious activities. Helping them figure out how to put Krishna as a presence in their life, helping them to learn about Krishna. And then what about one's job? Well, all of us are householders, and we've all got some type of work that we have to do. And that work pays the bills. And what does it pay the bills for? That house, which hopefully we're using as a temple for Krishna. So in that job, how do we associate with our employees, with our other associates there, our other employees in the business? Well, it's going to be different in each situation. Maybe we can't straight out preach Krishna consciousness, but we can subtly share prasadam. Every business has a lunchroom or break room, as they call it, and we all have this experience. You go in and somebody brought donuts in the morning and they're all sitting there. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I am a huge donut fan, have been my whole life. So I walk into this break room and I see these donuts and I know I'm not getting any donuts. They've all got eggs in them. No donuts for Chaturama. But we can bring our own prasadam from home. Muffins that the wife makes or some cookies, whatever, something like this. And that we can distribute. That's distributing prasadam. So we may not directly be in a dhoti with tilak and a shaved head. Here's a Bhagavad Gita, please take it. But we're giving prasadam in a very gentle way. Even more to the point, we're showing an example of what a devotee gentleman, what a devotee lady behaves like. They're seeing that in us. Don't think for a second these people don't look at us and realize there's something different. Most of the people that get to know us, they realize we're devotees. They understand. We share that with them about ourselves. And then for them to see how we behave, what our activities are, what our ethics are, what our moral standards are. In a world that is so bereft of these things, in a world that is so dying for this type of standard, the behavior of devotee is greatly respected. It's easy to do. It's easy to do. I mean, not always, but we have to start. And that start is our foundation for ourselves. Prabhupada would always say that before the doctor goes into the contaminated epidemic area, he always takes an injection himself. It's just like nowadays we have that example very prominent with this COVID pandemic. Those that are the doctors and nurses on the front lines, they're taking the most precaution, getting the injections, protecting themselves with different types of PEP, as they call it, masks and suits and things of this nature. They don't just wander in haphazardly, no, because they know they'll get infected also. So in the same way, we have to make sure that we're protecting ourselves before we go into the field of Maya. Factually speaking, outside that front door of our home, which is a temple, Maya is just there waiting, very eagerly waiting. Oh, here comes someone. Let me see what I can trap them up in. But if we place Krishna between ourselves and Maya, then Maya has no opportunity. In front of the personality of Godhead, Maya can simply put her head down and fold her hands. In front of us, the struggling jiva, she's very victorious. But if we insert Krishna there, then she cannot reach us. And how do we do that? This is the foundation of our time factor. We rise early in the morning. We engage in devotional activities, japa, listening to lectures, attending the temple, engaging in deity worship, reading from the Shastras, these different types of activities. One of the big advantages of the modern day and times that we live in is the ability to listen to so many lectures from so many wonderful devotees right there at the internet. There's this website, prabhupadvani.org, and all of Prabhupada's lectures and room conversations and everything are there. And one can listen so easily, even following the calendar year of where Prabhupada went and how he carried a theme with him as he spoke. Indradumna Swami has been quarantining himself in Vrindavan for the last year and been delivering amazing lectures on the different forests of Vrindavan. And now he's transitioned into the residents of Vrindavan, the Vaishnavacharyas. So the opportunity to hear in the morning before we go to work is so easy. The opportunity to engage in, we may not, many of our temples are closed. Many temples are not able to or are restricting how one can go for darshan. But every temple has a live internet feed, so we can see the deities before we go to work. And then most importantly, having some type of deity worship in our home. As householders, this is essential. This is the foundational use of our time in the morning. Prabhupada said that it is mandatory for the householder to have deity worship in the home. That way, the household becomes a temple and not a place for sense gratification. If there's no deity in the home, then we'll do anything, no restrictions. But when the deity is there, we realize, okay, I have to serve the deity, I have to feed the deity, I have to care for the deity. It becomes like a child. We have a responsibility and obligation. And that is what sets our morning in a very steadfast Krishna conscious manner, allows our time not to be wasted like the non-devotees. I'm sure you all experience this, but there's many of the individuals that I work with that from the time they get out of bed to the time they get to work is maybe 10 or 15 minutes. They barely roll out of bed, throw some clothes on and come in. Maybe they brush their teeth, maybe they showered, most likely not. You know, who knows what they ate at some fast food drive-through on the way into work. This is not the way for a civilized human being to spend their time, because these activities do not cultivate a higher consciousness. And without a higher consciousness, we're guaranteed to take another birth in a lower species. Prabhupada's very clear on this. How we utilize our time in developing our Krishna consciousness and advancing up the ladder of devotional life. This is the thing. Prabhupada said, you're never staying in one place. You're either going forward or you're falling backwards. So we have to do something that will advance our consciousness, advance our advancement. You know, it's like I mentioned, the investment. You know, we may be very concerned. What is the investment I'm getting back on my time? What is the result of my devotional practices? Okay, if I'm going to take this time and engage in japa and shastra reading and listening to classes and worship, what will I get back for that? It's a reasonable question. It's what anyone making a good investment is going to ask. Okay, what's the return going to be? Well, right here, there's a very nice lecture Prabhupada gave in 1972. I'd like to read this section of it. It's very pertinent here. Prabhupada says, Kama lobhayadas chaye, lusty, lust and greediness. The whole world is moving by lust and greediness. This is the stage of ignorance and passion. Those who are embarrassed with the lower qualities of material nature, they are embarrassed with these two things: lust, not being satisfied, and greediness. Give me more, give me more, give me more. This is interesting how Prabhupada uses the word embarrassed. A gentleman, if he's found in a questionable situation, he's embarrassed by it. Oh, you've seen me engage in such and such activity. I apologize for that. That wasn't proper. But a lower class man has no concern for this. They're not embarrassed by anything. But Prabhupada says a human being is embarrassed when they experience these two qualities of ignorance and passion, lust and greediness. Prabhupada continues. Although he is not satisfied, in this world you will see it. Sometimes they think, if I have an income of $1,000, then I will be very satisfied. But if they get that income of $1,000, then they want $100,000. If I just get this $100,000, then I will be satisfied. Everywhere in the world, the worker class, they're begging for more and more wages, more wages, more wages. But as soon as they get the money, we see specifically in the Western countries, then they utilize that money for lust and greediness. That's all. They do not know how to utilize their money. Just like a millionaire, so lusty. I have seen this in Paris. They're going to different clubs. And what is the business of that club? The old man, he is going. They pay some $50. Of course, this is Prabhupada's lecture in 1972. You don't get anything for $50 anymore. But Prabhupada says, they pay $50, and then there is young woman and wine in the club, and that is their pleasure. Lust, kama lobhayas chaye. One thing on one side, they are not satisfied. Even if they have got $1 million, still I want, still I want, still I want. That is one side, greediness. And then the other side, that is lust. This is called kama lobhayadas chaye. So we can become Krishna conscious immediately. That is the test. Immediately, by practicing Krishna consciousness, we become free from lust and greed. If he is not free from lust and greed, if he is simply making a show, then he is not Krishna conscious. That is the test. That is how to understand if you're making advancement. If these two symptoms are gone from the character, no more lustiness, no more greediness, we should be satisfied very nicely with what Krishna gives us. Why hanker in so many different directions? That is lusty. That means that we have not made it to the stage of Krishna consciousness, but we are still on the material platform. So this is the test. This is how my students can understand if they're advancing. No more lust, no more greediness. Voluntarily, you become free from these four things: no illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, and no gambling. And then you will be free from the darkness. So you give up these bad habits, and at the same time, you maintain yourselves by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And this is the process. So Prabhupada makes it very clear. Prabhupada makes it very clear what is the standard, what is the guideline to understand if your investment of time, if your investment of activities has become proper, if you've gotten something tangible out of it. In the investment world, there's this thing called cryptocurrency. Some of you may be familiar with it, particularly Bitcoin. And some years ago, Bitcoin became very prominent. A number of people invested in it, and then it sat dormant for many years, 3-4 years, with nothing happening. Matter of fact, losing money. But in the last 6 months, the return on this has been 200, 300, in some cases, even 400%. So an investor looks at that and sees, oh, this is a very good return on my money. I've invested this money and I've gotten a 300% return. This is very good. I can understand I'm successful in my investment endeavors. And Prabhupada has just given us the standard here. He says that if you actually are advanced in Krishna consciousness, the result will be no more lusty, no more greediness. So we're talking about investing our time in Krishna consciousness, and the answer to the logical question of, well, what will I get for that investment, is right here. We'll become spiritually situated, we'll become free from lust and free from greediness. These two activities, as Prabhupada says, they embarrass the living entity. No one wants to be embarrassed. You know, sometimes amongst friends, there'll be some joking thing that will embarrass us in front of our friends and everyone has a good laugh. But in a public scenario, no one wants to be embarrassed. So many of our politicians nowadays, they're embarrassed by their activities once those activities become public. Leaders in our community, religious leaders, we see so many of them become embarrassed by something that they've done that did not show control of the senses, that did not show that they were free of lust, that did not show they were free of being greedy. And then they have to step down. So as a aspiring Vaishnava, we don't want to be embarrassed. We want to be free from greediness and lustiness. And this comes by investing our time properly, by engaging ourselves in the process of Krishna consciousness, by engaging ourselves in the practice of devotional service. And then we will get that good return. We will get a return that benefits us spiritually. But let's suppose you've engaged in devotional practices for some time and you don't feel that you're free of lustiness, free of greediness. We see this sometimes. Devotee engaged in devotional practices, but still some lingering presence is there of different activities. So does this mean I should give up my Krishna conscious activities? Well, I tried it for some time, but this didn't happen. No. Just like a good financial investor knows, you invest your money and then you stay with it for the long haul. Times may be bumpy, times may be up and down, the result may come or go like that, but you don't take your investment out. You keep it in that particular bond or stock or company, whatever it is, and you ride it through. Every good financial investor recommends like this. So Srila Prabhupada is recommending for our spiritual investment of time the same thing. Simply continue practicing Krishna consciousness. According to one's circumstances, according to one's previous karma, according to one's activities, different results will be there for each of us. But the ultimate goal is proven by Shastra, is proven by Srila Prabhupada, and is proven by the association of Vaishnavas. We see this. Sometimes devotees come and it amazes us how advanced they become, how solid they are in their Krishna consciousness. We see that this is all a result of their endeavor. But it's still, they have to practice this. Still, they have to practice this in such a way that they become very, very solid and very, very steady. And whatever amount of work it takes, whatever effort it takes is no loss. It's no loss at all. So let us stay with the program. Let us stay with the practice of Krishna consciousness. Let us stay with our endeavors at executing our time properly, engaging that time factor that is always looming right over our head, just over the shoulder, you know. And I'm not a big fan of horror movies, but I know how they work. You know, the horror movie, the guy's always looking his shoulder, and the demon or the murderer or whatever it is, it's in there, is always just right behind him. You know, so the time factor is like this. It's always right over our shoulder. Every moment it's there. So what we have to do is engage ourselves solidly in Krishna consciousness, make that utilization of our time, and then we will see that the result will come very easily. We'll be satisfied. We'll get good association. We'll be able to set a nice example, all by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and all by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this is how we actually utilize our time properly. So I'll finish there. Kind of keeps within the time frame I was asked to follow. And if there's any questions or comments or corrections, I'm open to all the above. Prabhuji.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. It was really, wonderful class and inspiration that we can get from your class. Some of the quotes and examples that you gave from Prabhupada, especially investing for long term, you can reap off. I can see you have invested 40 plus years and you're still going strong. So which means there is something in this. So I want to request all the audience on Zoom and Facebook, if you have any questions or comments, unmute yourself. Meanwhile, I'll check on Facebook.
You know, one thing as far as what you were saying is that association is the key factor. Individually, we can become very distressed, very depressed, very disappointed. You know, the material onslaught may test us at times in which we don't feel capable of facing. But by association, we can have that strength. This is why Rupa Goswami gives those 6 different types of love expressed between devotees. And 2 of those 6 are revealing the mind and inquiring confidentially. This is an essential point to have this type of a relationship with devotees, or at least a devotee, that can help you, you know, that can guide you and wake you up. No, Prabhu, why are you doing that? That's not good for you. Please, that's not in your best interest, you know. This is what a friend does, you know. So we don't, as I say, you know, from the class, we don't want to embarrass ourselves by bad activity.
Thank you, Prabhu. Actually, I have one question from on Facebook land. Hare Krishna Prabhu, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. You were talking about the different levels and essentials of practice in our devotional life. In your many years of practice, what is the most important in your devotional life? What was the most important thing in your devotional life?
Well, as I just mentioned, association is the key factor. As far as devotional principles, chanting, reading Prabhupada's books are the foundation. But that can only be done when we have association. Now, of course, in my time, association meant we all lived together, packed up tight in the temple, you know. Now we all have our houses. I live here in the suburbs. I'm fortunate on the street I'm on, there's about 30 houses and 5 of them are occupied by devotee families. But that's not usually the case. Sometimes we're the only devotee on a block, you know? So one may say, oh, but I can't get association. But we can get association, just like we're doing right here today through the Zoom conferences, association with Prabhupada through reading his books, association with different acharyas by listening to their lectures, associating with Vrindavan, even if we can't go, just by seeing the videos and hearing the descriptions of. So association is the key factor because that will give us the impetus to continue with the practices, 4 regulative principles, 16 rounds, reading Prabhupada's books, listening to the lectures like that. These are the things that Prabhupada had us focus on when we lived in the temples back in the 70s. And these are the things we can still do through the wonder of this technology, even if we're not living within a temple ashram structure. So association, very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji. Anyone else on the Zoom have a question or a comment?
I don't think it's possible to stress how much association is essential. We are social entities by nature. Mm-hmm. You know, occasionally someone's a hermit. I have one devotee friend that recently passed away that kept to himself, hardly had any association, but he was very, you know, he had deities in his home and he chanted and read Prabhupada's books, but he liked to stay by himself. But that's not the normal. Most of us are social by nature. So we're going to associate with someone. We're going to associate with some group of people in a situation. So the essential factor of keeping association with devotees in some means or another is what will keep us serious in our devotional life. In the 40 years of marriage that my wife and I have had, every decision we've made on where we're going to live or what job we were going to take or service had to do with what association will we get. You know, maybe it wasn't even in a temple community where there was a fixed temple, but there would be a group of devotees there. So this association is so, so important.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
All right, so shall we finish there for today?
I have one.
Oh yeah, please.
So especially devotees who lived in the Prabhupada times, they have a story to take and inspire others. And I want to ask how being in those early ages of even your life, how we were able to really connect to Krishna consciousness and follow Prabhupada and continue for so long. Was there any key moment that triggered, oh, hey, I need to connect with this moment?
I was very fortunate as a young devotee. The temple that I lived in, we had a very good study program. Mm-hmm. We would get up in the morning. Now, there were 27 devotees in the temple I grew up in. Only 4 of them were initiated. The rest of us were bhaktas and bhaktins. So we'd get up in the morning, Mangal Arti, Japa, Guru Puja, and we'd have our first class, Srimad Bhagavatam. After Srimad Bhagavatam, we had breakfast. Now, back in those days, breakfast was sweet rice and halva as much as any one person could eat. When you're 19, 20 years old, you can do that. And then we would have 1 hour of cleaning duties. Our temple was spotless. Then we would have class on Nectar of Devotion. After Nectar Devotion, we would have class on the Shri Upanishad. After the Shri Upanishad, now that's 3 classes right there already. After Shri Upanishad, we'd have the noon arti. What's that? Bhaja Bhakatabat, Salashi Guru Hari, that famous kirtan. And we do that. Then we would go out on street Harinam or street book distribution. Then we would come back and we would shower and we would have Gora Arti. After a day in the streets, all of our enthusiasm for that Gora Arti. And then after that, Bhagavad Gita class, 4 classes. And then hot milk prasadam and reading Krishna book, 5 classes. So every day we had 5 classes on Shastra. That gives such a solid foundation. Mm-hmm. Now, it's true of those devotees, some of them left. Some of my God brothers and God sisters I got initiated with didn't last the entire time. But my observation is because they did not embrace the process. They felt there's something else, something more. This isn't satisfying me. If we remain satisfied by the simple activities of Krishna consciousness, if we remain satisfied by reading Prabhupada's books and hearing from Prabhupada his instructions, if we remain satisfied by each other's association, then we can last the long haul. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, our entire life. And we see that so many devotees can have a history of, being here since the 70s, some since the late 60s, and this is from a standard of being able to stay, fixed in devotional practices. It all goes back to association. That's my key factor. Everybody asks me, it all goes back to association.
Thank
all
you.
right.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Prabhus, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about Krishna consciousness with all of you. I look forward to seeing you all at Gaur Purnima.
Yes, Prabhuji. Please also, make your time to come and on the Zoom calls whenever your time permits, and engage us with your good association.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.